Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Founders Cut. Today I'm here with Kerry Gallivan, the CEO and founder of Chimani. Before we dive into what Chimani is, I like to dive into who the founder is. And so before we get started here, Kerry, if you wouldn't mind kind of introducing yourself to the audience, I usually ask people how they got to where they are today. So however deep or shallow you want to dive into that.
Yeah, Adam, great to be here, and thanks for having me on your podcast. Yeah, I've got a pretty diverse background. In college, I was focused a lot on development studies, and then got the computer bug during that time period. So, dating myself, this is probably early 90s. I headed off to Zimbabwe to work on the first internet service provider. It consisted two PCs and a dial-up connection to Johannesburg because that was the closest internet T1 line. Was there and had an opportunity to actually go to do an outward bound program, if folks are familiar with that, based here in the US, but they had a program in Zimbabwe. And there I did it at the Chimani Mountains National Park, 2-week program that was a really profound experience. And so I'll kind of talk more about how that connected to Chimani, but spent the next 9 years really working on a pretty innovative project. It was the first email network for healthcare workers in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. The project was called Satellite. And we had launched our own low Earth orbit satellite, and I was the person running around the world doing the ground station installations and trainings. So fresh out of college and putting a lot of miles behind me. So from there, went on to work at another really interesting project. It was at the Boston University School of Public Health, project called Join Together, and we focused on web-based technologies that could impact both gun violence prevention as well as substance abuse prevention. So one of the interesting projects that spun out of that I was a part of was called QuitNet, and that was the very first smoking cessation website. So once again, this was probably around 2000, 2001 that was spun out, which eventually got acquired by a pharmaceutical company. Moved up to Maine and worked as a K-12 technology director. So getting a really involved with a lot of students, really sort of that great sort of incubator kind of environment. And that's what really led me to working on Chimani from there. So lots of interesting projects and a lot of great opportunities that I've been fortunate to work on.
So it sounds like you were doing the work that Elon was trying to do in Africa before it even became the cool thing to do, right? Bringing in
Yeah,
low orbit satellites to kind of connect those countries and those people. So very cool. That is a one of the most diverse backgrounds I've had on the show. So cool to hear that. Well, let's talk a little bit more about what you're building today then. So what brought you to founding Chimani?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I had this really profound experience in this national park in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, I was living there. I lived there for about 6 months. Everyone referred to this area as Chimani. It was just sort of the nickname. And so it was probably about, I believe it was like 2000, no, 1998, actually. I registered the domain name Chimani.com. I just missed the cutoff of it being free. Um, and I sat on it and I said to myself, I'm gonna like turn this into a company. I didn't know what it was, but it was a cool name. And I sat on the .com domain forever. And then fast forward, first generation iPhone came out. I was hiking in Acadia National Park on a lousy spring day with snow and rain, and I wanted to use my phone more to navigate the experience. And I knew that more and more people were going to start using their phones as part of this experience. And so that really truly led to the epiphany moment on top of a mountain to create Chimani. And so from the start, Chimani has really been taking my experience of working in all throughout Africa and Southeast Asia, where any trip I would go on, particularly to a new country, I'd always have a Lonely Planet guide with me, really believed in that curated content model to really lay the foundation of the experience. And then now, of course, today, we look at that model, but we apply it to a mobile device. We make sure it works offline, and it's all geared towards national parks. So what we're doing with Chimani is helping people not only plan their trips going to national parks, but also make sure that they have all that necessary information accessible, so that they both don't get lost when they're in the parks, but also more importantly, they have the best possible experience that they can have and ultimately come back from that experiencing, wanting to further support the national parks and further support conservation, both here in the US and globally.
So gone are the days of the paper map with the paper itinerary on the notepad. Is that what you're telling me?
I would definitely, as someone who definitely goes backcountry, every once in a while, you still need a paper map. I would definitely not rely even on my own app, backcountry, because more for battery issues,
Sure.
probably more concerns, especially if you throw in any temperature variables in there. But our audience really is more front country.
Okay.
We like to say we affectionately call them windshield tourists.
Mm,
They tend to skew much older. We're very much, most of our users are probably 55 and older, so definitely baby boom. And they tend to not go more than, say, a mile or so from the trailhead. So
okay.
the mobile app works great. It works, offline, so that we've got the parks still have a lot of self-coverage pocket issues. It's improving, and the Park Service certainly wants to improve it more from a safety perspective.
Yeah.
But you still have to plan for offline connectivity. So our audience is definitely not the backcountry audience.
Sounds like the infrastructure play for Chimani is to start launching low orbit satellites for for better internet coverage, huh? Um,
Maybe we'll do a deal with Starlink.
um, Tell me a little bit more about why you decided that this was not just a passion project, but something that you actually want to turn into like a full time endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, these days, especially post-COVID, national parks, their attendance has just swelled tremendously. And the parks aren't necessarily getting much bigger. The infrastructure that supports them are not necessarily getting it much bigger, but the demand is increasing tremendously, especially as you talk about this particular demographic that we really focus on, where every year you're going to have 4.1 million Americans turning the age 65. And a large percentage of those people not only both have money, but they have time and a desire to go to a lot of these iconic parks. So there's going to be an increasing demand. And really what the parks are struggling on right now are a lot of the overcrowding issues. So that's really where we're taking the model of Chimani, and we're taking that base content and creating much more personalized planning tools. This is where we're putting it behind processing our content and what we're getting from both the users and that deep written content, and processing that through a large language model so that we can really give the user a completely personalized experience. But then when they get there, they can actually begin to receive real-time updates, almost like a Waze for national parks, so that they can really begin to sort of finesse and navigate these overcrowding issues. And the other major concern for us that we're helping to address too is just the variables which climate change are throwing into every travel experience. So the product needs to now be a much more dynamic product. And that's really what we're excited about building for this next generation, and what we believe really turns us into a venture backable business.
So do you sell the services to the parks themselves, or is it strictly to the customers?
Yeah, so it's directly to customers. So it's a B2C based on a subscription model. I'd worked with the UN in the past, and obviously my work overseas, worked with a lot of federal agencies. And I knew when I started Chimani that the speed at which those agencies move around technology and both the customer facing experience, I would just be restricted. So I
Sure.
never wanted to be a service provider for the Park Service. And so we decided to go directly. I think the other thing that allows for us to uh, sort of better serve the customer too is a lot of people don't know necessarily the distinction between what's a national park, what's a national wildlife refuge, what's a state park, what's a national forest. A lot of people just think of them as parks. And so we like to sort of blur the lines based on what your needs are and your interests are. So that's another advantage as to being in the position that we are.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Talk me through like the user experience a bit. So if I'm on this platform, how does it help with like you throwing out the example of overcrowding? Does it suggest that I go check out a different part of the park if your systems and other data sources that you're gathering from say that one 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 iconic view is overcrowded, so check out this instead. Like, what are you doing for people in real time, or is it just more just for the planning purposes?
Yeah, so right now, so the planning certainly begins to customize, but the real-time experience, we do have these live alerts which people can submit. So it effectively is just like that Waze like experience, so that people can actually see moments in time of like what's happening throughout the park. You know, anything from actually like a wildlife sighting, which in the case of a park like Yellowstone, a wildlife sighting also means a lot of traffic. Or it could be like an opportunity to actually see a grizzly bear or even a moose. So it's both to help people sort of draw them to what they might be interested in, but then to also help them plan around so that they can navigate that. You know, ultimately, what we're moving towards is to constantly have all of those correlated to what the known itinerary is, and then to really begin to make that a much more interactive experience. And that's what we're working towards right now. But right now, it's more of a casual consumption of like what's happening within the park based on what users are reporting above and beyond that itinerary that we recommend to them.
If someone wants to find the platform, how do they get to it?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to either App Store, either Apple or Google Play, and just type in Chimani, Chimani, or just go to chimani.com. So once again, Chimani.com, and you can download and learn about the app there. And so we're supposed both iOS and Android, and then have a somewhat limited web app that we keep on building, but primarily being mobile first.
For those that are listening that might be on the founder side, what kind of advice would you give your younger self as you first got off the ground on this journey?
Yeah, so many lessons learned. I've been doing it quite a while. But I think though, I think persistence is really almost an unspoken trait because I think the longer you stay in the game, the more opportunities that can come your way. And that's certainly been the case with Shimani. We've had some amazing opportunities to work with brands like Subaru over the years, and it's all just become, you know, how do you stay scrappy and keep it going? I would also just focus so much on how do you ultimately generate a profit? How do you make yourself, you know, as we like to say, default alive? It just puts yourself in a better position from a fundraising perspective and just continuing on, regardless of having to sort of tie yourself to external investor funding. And it allows you to better control your vision and ultimately turns that into a better product. So I think, and then once you have those positive KPIs, then I think things become a lot easier for folks going forward. So persistence, focus on net positive in terms of profits, and then ultimately comes down to a super positive product customer experience and love your customers. You know, they're always the number one email that I respond to right away. And I think over time, we've built a tremendous relationship with our core customers. Now we're just having to tell more people about Chimani and how great it is.
Yeah, I think it's something that people don't realize is oftentimes when you see a startup that has, been classified as a success story, you don't know how many times, if you ask that founder in a quiet room in private, how many times did you think the company was dead or on life support or whatever the case may be. It's probably more times than they can count, and a lot of the times that they try to, forget about or still have selective memory. So you're right. Whatever you can do to stay alive long enough to have those opportunities to have a chance to succeed. They talk about scaling and growth, but oftentimes it's surviving long enough to see the right opportunity to like really execute and move forward. Um, for the customers that you've had, what has been like the biggest? What have they told you? Like you say, you speak with them a lot. Like, why do they keep coming back?
Yeah. I think for one, it's the range of content and the depth of content. So we really do give them, like we like to think of it as every guide is the equivalent to walking into like a From or walking into a Barnes and Noble and grabbing a book off of the shelf. That's really the depth of content that we go. You just can't find that on a mobile app. Most apps still to this day, even in the outdoor space, just surface level organic content that they populate. So I think that is just adds to their experience. I think ultimately with our new trip planning tool, what we consistently find is that we're saving them not just time and money, but we truly are informing them because a lot of the iconic parks right now are shifting to a reservation-based experience. So you need to actually reserve a slot to get into the park, which was kind of unheard of in the past. And that's a very new phenomenon for a lot of people who haven't gone to the parks recently or have never gone to the parks. And so creating that awareness, and we've got folks that literally are like, we've showed up at the entrance to Rocky Mountains National Park. Thank goodness we knew that we needed a reservation by looking at your app, because otherwise we wouldn't know to actually book that reservation just to get into the park. We're not even talking about anything special section of the park or anything like that. That's how complicated the parks are becoming, and that's what people are loving about the app. Is we take that deep experience, which you're not going to find in a Google Maps. Either you'll struggle to get that information just going to the National Park Service website. So it's really making it as convenient as possible for those national park travelers.
And then on the business side, from like to keep the lights on, what are you charging customers that want to use the platform?
Yeah, so it's a $60 annual subscription, and that gives you access to all of the different guides as well as the being able to modify the trip planning tool and continue to use that, and then the offline functionality. If folks are just traveling, say for a summertime, then we've got a $30 quarterly subscription plan as well. Or if you're just sort of, just going to be traveling for a couple of weeks, we've got a $20 monthly subscription as well. So we really try and offer a wide range based on what people's preferences are from a travel experience. Most of our subscribers are annual because, like I said, it's definitely skews older, so they
Hmm.
know that they're gonna consistently be using the product. So that's generally what people tend to subscribe to. And then we do work because we do have a lot of free users. There's a lot of content that is still available for free that you don't have to have a subscription for within the app. And for those folks, we're able to work with brands like Nissan, the car company, as well as Nikon camera and National Geographic and Pistachio brands. And that's where we work directly with brands to create unique brand engagements. So we both have a subscription-based revenue model coupled with a premium advertising model that we work with brands on.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. A little bit of a win-win. You can't have everything for free, right? Someone's got to
Right.
subsidize it if you wanted the free content.
Yep.
One more question about the product itself in terms of the content. The parks information. How are you doing that in-house? Are you scraping the web? Are you hiring outside parties? How does that all work?
No, I like to think of it as sort of an OG approach to content where we actually work with travel writers, but it never sees a printed publication. We work with a whole range of travel writers that still specialize in geographic areas and particular parks, and that serves as the basis. And then what we like to think we're doing is then we take that core content, which we update on a regular basis, but then we layer that with all of our organic user generated
Okay.
content. And so we really sort of enrich it in many ways. And now, as we then begin to connect external APIs to begin processing it, that whole content is being enriched through a number of different ways. So we don't do web scraping, it's all original content, which now, as we put this content through these models, then we're getting very unique results, which you're not going to get if you just pull up ChatGPT and type it in or go to Gemini. That is very unique to our content, which is why we offer the best possible and most personalized experience when you're using our app.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Where do you see Chimani at its biggest and brightest?
Yeah, I think it's really when you think of going on any trip, not just the United States, but if you decide you're even going to go to Europe, or you're going to go to Costa Rica, you're going to do that trip to Croatia, where you're going to be using Chimani to help facilitate those aspects of your experiences where you want to engage in the outdoors. Every single country in the world is trying to build national parks and trying to route people to their national parks because that recognize that is important tourism dollars. And once you leave the United States in particular, a lot of that information is even harder to get
Mhm.
in terms of really getting to these places. So we truly want to be, if you know, I've long pride, I love Lonely Planet from a print guidebook, but we really want to kind of be that Lonely Planet guide of mobile apps and of national parks and outdoor experiences globally going forward.
Got it. No, that's a great vision. Um, you want to be known as the brand that helps people plug into the corners of the earth that often are unexplored or can't be explored because of pure ignorance, right? And I don't mean that in a
Right.
bad way, but like if you don't
No,
know and you're too timid to find out on your own, then oftentimes you just default go to the things that are easily accessible, and oftentimes the more beaten track when the off
exactly.
beaten track might be a little bit more fun to explore. Um, what kinds of people, whether it's customers, partners, investors, who are you trying to get connected with today?
Yeah, I think we were looking at, I think from like an investor perspective, people that recognize that not only is national parks in the US based, but globally is a huge market. And in particular, who are interested in this growing, we like to call it the silver tsunami. You've got a demographic wave that is just hitting the world with so many people moving into the baby boomer age group. That is a tremendous sort of economic opportunity as well. From a team perspective, I think we're looking at folks who obviously we're mobile first. So we've got a lot of the backend engineering, iOS. We do everything natively on iOS and Android. We're moving increasingly, of course, into the AI space. So really interested in talking to folks in the AI engineer, data engineers in particular, so that we can really begin to leverage all of the work that we're initially doing. And then we're unique because we're always looking for folks that are writers and interesting
Mm,
content producers at a higher quality. And so that sort of rounds out in a nutshell, kind of like our core team. And then, of course, people love to do social media around the national parks and the outdoors. So we're always looking to work with folks either on a co-branded basis or working with different content creators because our marketing really it lives and breathes based on that kind of imagery.
sure. No, that all makes sense. And if people want to get in touch with you, best to go to the website, or how can they get on your radar fastest?
They can email me at Kerry, Kerry, at Chimani.com. Feel free to email me directly.
All right, Carrie at Chimani.com. As we kind of wrap this up, any closing thoughts, any advice, anything you want to shout out, kind of give you an opportunity to speak your mind.
Yeah, no, I mean, just first, thanks for the opportunity just to share our story. I think just, when people are thinking about going to national parks or they have a loved one, because national park trips always seem to come up when we're at the 4th of July barbecue or where places have people have gone or they're planning to go. Always remember, hey, you got to check out that Chimani app before you go, because one thing that we hear the most is that I wish I knew about Chimani before I went to fill in the blank national park. So the more we can spread, the better everyone will be.
I can't help but continue to think that there's a co-branded opportunity with Chobani right around the corner that
Yeah,
that needs to be um, just brought to fruition. Well, Carrie, I really appreciate your time. As someone that does a lot of, I guess I would be considered kind of the type of tourism that you talk about, less than a mile off the beaten track type of thing. I wouldn't mind having a source like this. So definitely before our next trip, my wife and I take, we're gonna download the app and give it a go. So, it's a pleasure to talk to you about your journey, and looking forward to sharing it with the rest of my community.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Adam. And it's great chatting with you and great questions as well. So I really appreciate the chance to share our story.